Hi, I'm Lou, and this is Lily Rowe, who's still asleep. Thanks for tuning in. We thought we'd make another video exploring how Forest School fits with elements of the early years foundation stage. So in this one, we're going to explore the characteristics of effective learning. I have already done a video on how Forest School fits with the core principles of the EYFS, so you might want to check that one out as well. I'll pop the link in the description below. But in this one, it's the characteristics of effective learning. So in the EYFS, there are these three characteristics that are not what we want to teach early years children. It's actually kind of how we want children to be. So they're describing desirable behaviours for learning fundamentally. And this is within the statutory document for the EYFS. So the three things are playing and exploring, active learning, and creative and critical thinking. So those are the three elements that the EYFS wants to nurture, because they know if a person has those three attributes, then that will set them up for lifelong learning. So let's take a look at each of these and explore how does Forest School fit them, because I basically think Forest School fits all three of these really easily. So firstly, playing and exploring. Well, Forest School is fundamentally a play-based ethos. So when we refer to play at Forest School, we're talking about a behaviour that is freely chosen, personally directed and intrinsically motivated. And that is basically where we want to try to get to at Forest School, high quality play in nature. Sometimes we can't start there at the beginning of a programme because children might be play deprived. They might not have ever been in a wood before. There's lots of reasons why you can't just drop children into a wood and go play. So it might take time to get there, but that's ultimately where we're trying to end up. And we do this through creating a safe, secure, non-judgmental, trusting environment so that the children feel safe and secure. There might be a level of attachment with the adults there as well. So we're talking about building relationships so that, particularly in very young children, they feel able to go and play and explore. Because if a child doesn't feel safe and secure, then they're going to be very hesitant about kind of exploring the world around them. So we acknowledge that in Forest School, and that's a big part, certainly at the early stages of a Forest School, getting that sense of security there so that young children can then freely play and explore. Because of the non-judgmental ethos, we're also, I guess, building resilience and self-esteem through allowing children to have a go at things, discover for themselves. If something doesn't work out how they want it to, that's not a big deal. You know, we're not, you don't get it wrong at Forest School. There is no right or wrong. It's about exploring your own journey at Forest School. Because we're in a dynamic, natural environment, there's so much to explore, to stimulate, to provoke curiosity in learners. It's constantly changing out here, and there is just, a wealth of play materials just lying around, just lying around. I don't have to even move to find intriguing things that will kind of stimulate my senses, and I can interact with them in all sorts of different ways. I can hear bird song, the wind is blowing, it's just happening here and now. As a practitioner, I don't have to plan for that. I don't have to resource it even. There's just a wealth of natural play, resources here to explore. Of course, as a practitioner, I do perhaps have to balance that with managing risk, because we want children to freely explore, but we also want to make sure that they are within parameters, so the appropriate level of risk is there, but perhaps not too much risk if there are dangerous things lying about that could cause serious harm, then my role as a practitioner is to manage that. And I guess that comes back down to creating a safe, secure space for the learners. It's emotional safe space, but it's also a physical safe space to enable them to play and explore. So I would say that is basically a core part of, in fact it is Forest School. Forest School is playing and exploring. So we're there with that characteristic of effective learning. So next there's active learning, which I suppose ties into being motivated to discover and learn and find out about the world. And I guess this builds from the previous one. If you're playing and exploring and you're feeling safe and secure, then because you have control over what you're doing, you can freely choose, you can personally direct, then that inherently is active learning. You're following your own curiosities and you're discovering along the way. You can try things out, you can experiment. If that doesn't work out, you can reflect and change what you're doing and try again. So I would say play by its very nature is active learning. It's inherent within it. I guess here in terms of Forest School and in terms of any play, it's important to recognise that play will look different from person to person. So in one learner, play might be very loud and physical and running about and games, away kind of thing. But for another learner, play might be very quiet, it might be solitary, it might be just sitting, experimenting with sticks and feeling the leaves, or even just lying, looking up at the sky could be one type of play. So recognising that not all play is the same, and play is very personal as well. What one person's play might be a right chore or faff to another person. So at Forest School we recognise the uniqueness of each individual and how they want to express that play, how they want to learn in their own active way. We recognise can look very different from one another, and so because we're non-judgmental, again, there's space for that. There's space and time for that. Talking about space and time, of course, because Forest School is a long-term process and we're out week after week after week, that allows for long-term projects. So if a child is really interested in mini beasts, for example, we've got time to build on that over weeks and months. It could start with just looking at mini beasts, and then maybe we'll use some equipment to go find the mini beasts. We talk about mini beast houses and homes. Maybe we build a bug hotel. Maybe we do a survey to find out what mini beasts are, the same mini beasts in the ground as there is in the trees. You could actually draw that out over many, many months, that inquiry into mini beasts. So there's a real depth of learning that we can get to in Forest School because it is long term and we're back together week after week after week. So yes, I would say active learning and Forest School, same thing. So then creative and critical thinking. So again, in my mind, this is all kind of part of play again. In fact, I would say that creative expression kind of is the same as play, because creativity is not just the arts and dance and music and stuff. Creative is a process of how we think, and I would say kind of it's inherent within play. It all comes down to play. That's why it's so important to play as humans. Creative critical thinking. So because we're out here, children are able to be curious in their own way, in their own kind of journeys of learning, and we're here together as well. So as well as like an individual following their own inquiry, there is the enrichment of the other children and the adults that are present as well. So as practitioners, we can really scaffold learners in terms of their thinking and inquiry through asking very careful questions, maybe encouraging observation, noticing things. There are several games that we might play at Forest School that are all about activating our senses, noticing the little things, noticing the big things, looking at the environment in a different way. These sensory games are a great way to stimulate critical thinking and creative thinking, because once you tune in and notice just how awesome the natural world is, you can't help but have a brain filled with questions. Who made those tracks in the mud? Where were they going? What were they doing? Why has that tree got smooth bark and that tree got ridged bark? Who's been eating these leaves? What's that sound? Do the birds have the same voices or different voices? There's question after question after question just by being out here in nature. And as Forest School leaders, we might be well placed to then follow some of those questions and help the learners discover for themselves rather than just answering it, because sometimes just even if we know the answer, answering a question isn't always the best route of optimizing learning. It's far better to help somebody discover the answer for themselves, even if that might take a little while. But as we've said, we have got the luxury of time at Forest School, because we can come back next week and maybe bring some books or resources out with us that will help children discover more about what they're interested in. I'd also say, being out here in nature, it's the best place to see how things are connected and how things are linked together, which is a fundamental part, I guess, of thinking and exploring. There's cause and effect out here because it's a real environment. So when it rains, the water pools in here and you can see how the rainwater will flow down. So if I've got an idea as an early years child that I want to make a dam or something, I'm exploring with that water flowing from the high land to the low land, and I'm getting immediate feedback of how the sticks I place in the way will change the course of the water flow. So it's real life, it's happening in real time. I think sometimes one of the issues with screen time, computer games and that style of learning, even if they're educational games, is they're not real. They're not giving you real life feedback. They're all abstractions. They're not kind of concrete things that you can physically touch and hold and smell. And I think particularly in early years, that's what children need. They need real life materials that stimulate their senses and that they can see how their actions and choices affect the world around them and how things respond. So nature is a very obvious place for that to take place because it's real, it's life, it's happening all around us. Isn't it, Bubs? Bubs is waking up. He agrees. Oh, she's gone back to sleep. Of course, being out in nature with all these lovely natural materials also gives us creative inspiration and resources to express our creativity as well. So the sheer fact that we have these materials around might stimulate us making stuff, sculptures, artwork, music, all sorts of things. So we might be biased, but we believe that Forest School is the perfect place to encourage those three characteristics of effective learning, because Forest School is all about playing and exploring, it's all about active learning, and it's all about creative and critical thinking. So we just need to get all early years children out into nature and into Forest School. Forest School supports the EYFS, the characteristics of effective learning, and the rest, making the links come naturally so you can justify why you head to the trees. You saying bye-bye? Bye-bye.